Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, survivors of the Grenfell Tower fire are to be given an extra 2 weeks to make their case about which issues the forthcoming public inquiry should consider. It comes as 29-year-old Berkti Haftom and 26-year-old Gloria Trevisan were officially identified as victims of the fire. And tonight we have more news on the type of cladding used on the tower. Last night, this programme revealed that a third previously unreported material was present. So today we asked the government if this type of material would feature in new fire safety tests they've ordered. Our reporter Ed Howkert joins me now. So Ed, what did they say?
So last week the Department for Communities and Local Government announced advanced experiments into the cladding systems used at Grenfell Tower and in hundreds of other tower blocks. Well, so the idea of these experiments is that you take several stories of cladding and see how the different elements of the cladding interact when they're in a fire. Now, we looked at the fine print, and there are only two types of insulation that are going to be tested. The first is mineral wool, and the second is PIR board. Now, that's the stuff that was used mainly in Grenfell. But there is a third type. Now, this is called phenolic foam. That's used in hundreds of buildings. It was also used, as we reported last night, on the Grenfell Tower. And it seems to be quite a serious omission that it wasn't mentioned and isn't going to be tested in this report.
So are they going to expand the test then as a result?
Well, tonight they told us that they think it's most appropriate to be testing PIR foam, but that there are lots of different foam products available. Now, the problem here is that not all of those foam products were on Grenfell Tower. And the fire experts we've spoken to have said straightforwardly that this is a matter of confidence, making sure that people can be confident about their safety. So it should be included.
Ed, thank you very much. Well, one woman who was there at the Grenfell Tower fire from the very early hours was London Fire Brigade's new Commissioner, Danny Cotton. In an exclusive interview a month on from the disaster, Commissioner Cotton spoke to our social affairs editor, Jackie Long, about that terrible night.
It was just like nothing I'd ever seen. And as soon as I got there, you know, I looked at the building and I was genuinely concerned for the people that we knew were in there and concerned for the firefighters that were going in there time and time again because the fire was so severe and you could see as the firefighters came out, they were really working as hard as they could. So the feeling of responsibility I had was absolutely immense.
What was the nature of the fire that was so different?
Just the volume of it. You know, I've been to many high-rise fires, but to see fire across so many floors, you know, involving such a large-scale building was something that I'd never experienced and none of us ever had. So the plans to deal with that are just very different than anything we ever do. We always tackle high-rise fires from inside the building. That's the way we train, the way we practice, the way the equipment inside is laid out. But the volume of going in and tackling it on floor after floor and looking at the intensity of the fire, that was just very different than anything I'd ever seen.
There were reports that firefighters had gone in, thought they dealt with it in one flat and come away again, only for the fire to take hold outside. Is that true?
Obviously, the way the fire spread was very unique. It is subject to an investigation. I've got my fire investigation team working very closely with the police to have a look at that. You know, it is very different. Normally, when we have a fire in a high-rise, it is contained to the room or the flat of origin, and that's the way the building's designed. It's designed to be contained in that compartment for a minimum of 30 and if not 60 minutes. You know, clearly the fire on that night did not behave like that, and that's one of the main lines of inquiry that the police and the public inquiry will look into.
You say this was unprecedented in nature and scale. Were you equipped to deal with it?
London Fire Brigade at the height of the incident had over 70 fire engines there with all the firefighting personnel, as well as a huge range of specialist equipment and officers. Yes, we had sufficient resources there on the scene. We couldn't physically have put any more people into that building. You know, the actual nature of the building, the way they're designed, the staircase in a high-rise building is not designed for hundreds of people to be coming in and out. So, you know, more firefighters would not have been able to help tackle that blaze. The building behaved so differently. You know, it was such a challenge to us, but having more fire engines or firefighters there would not have helped.
Are you saying that nothing would have made any difference that night?
A miracle? I genuinely don't think anything available to us as firefighters in the world, anywhere in the world, would particularly have made a difference. You know, we do need to look at it as part of the inquiry. People are coming up with all different kinds of suggestions, and there's all sorts of experts around. I think people need to let the inquiry play out. But from everything I've seen as a professional firefighter, you know, I believe that we did the very best we could on that night.
One of the most troubling aspects, though, I'm assuming for you and your firefighters, is the stay put policy, the advice to stay put. When you look back on that night, do you have regrets about how that was implemented?
That's subject to the inquiry, and it is something I'm not going to discuss on this at the moment. Stay put advice for the vast majority of people who live in high-rise buildings is absolutely the best advice. As I went back before, talking about staircases, if we evacuated every tower block every time there was a small fire, the firefighters would never get in to put the fire out because the staircases aren't designed to have hundreds of people coming down. And the other thing is, if you have hundreds of people coming down, opening and closing doors, it can actually help fire spread or smoke spread throughout the building.
But we know from the police that there were harrowing calls made by people 55 minutes long, an hour long, who were staying put and who subsequently died.
What I can say very early on is that people were reporting smoke in the communal parts of the building, you know, and that's not how a building normally behaves in fire. Had hundreds of people evacuated down early on, my firefighters would never have got into the building either, and we couldn't have got our firefighting equipment in there. The reason we have the stay put policy is because for 99% of high rises, it's absolutely the safest thing to do and the best thing to do for those people living in that high rise.
What is your position now, looking forward, on that stay put policy? Would you, if you went to a high rise now, would that policy be the same, given what you've been through, given what your firefighters have been through? Absolutely.
We've had high-rise fires since then. We've advised stay put, and the members of the public have stayed put in their flat and perfectly safe and well.
Do you think it's still okay to have that policy?
Absolutely. As I said, for the majority of buildings that are built in the right way and have the right fire safety measures inside, where they've been properly looked after by the responsible people in charge of the building, it's absolutely the right advice.
Tell me how your firefighters are coping after the Grenfell fire.
Well, as you can imagine, I have a lot of firefighters who saw a lot of tragedy and a lot of terrible things, and you know, we have put a lot of steps in place to provide counselling and well-being and support. A lot of the support they get from their peers and colleagues is invaluable. But I have lots of people who, you know, are suffering and will suffer into the future from things that happened that evening.
Do you anticipate being criticised in the public inquiry?
I think that it's inevitable that every party will always be subject to some form of criticism. I think that's the nature of an inquiry, and I think if an inquiry didn't ask all the questions of all the parties, they wouldn't be doing their job, and we wouldn't be doing the job for all those people in that building if we weren't all probed into our actions and what we did. What I will do is defend the actions of my firefighters on the night, because, you know, they worked very, very hard. And individual criticism against any of them, you know, would be a very difficult thing for me to deal with, because, you know, they could not have given any more of themselves on that night.
Given what you know now about what happened at Grenfell, about the cladding issues, insulation, what are your feelings about that?
My feelings are that, you know, there's a number of key messages I want to get across, that the responsible people, the building providers, the local authorities should be in all of their buildings conducting risk assessments. They should be looking to make sure those buildings are fit for purpose for the people living in them. We need to make sure that housing providers are vigilant and making sure where they've got a risk assessment, it's updated annually, and that somebody physically checks the building. It's not just a tabletop exercise. You know, people need to actually go out and do those inspections to make sure there aren't any deficiencies in the buildings.
How have you dealt with this?
I've not had time to stop yet. You know, the last 4 weeks have been full on, very busy. You know, I take immense solace in the fact that I have the most amazing professional people who work for me and with me. You couldn't be human and not have it affect you. You know, you couldn't be a firefighter for 29 years and not turn up to a terrible tragedy and not be personally affected by it. Of course I am. You know, it's something I find very difficult, because knowing those people in that building is a terribly, terribly difficult thing to have experienced and been part of.
That was Danny Cotton, Commissioner of the London Fire Brigade, talking to Jackie Long earlier.
The Grenfell Tower tragedy has yielded many extraordinary human stories, from some miraculously saved to others who had to leave behind family members, never to see them again. Many of us probably remember the story of a 16-year-old girl who sat her GCSE exams in her pyjamas the morning after that dreadful night 1 month ago. That was Ines Alves, who lived on the 13th floor. Well, her mother, Fatima Alves, hasn't spoken publicly before about what the family has been through, but she and her husband have been recounting their experience to our special correspondent, Katie Razzle.
I'm very lucky to be here. Many people, they pass away, they die. They are ashes now.
Keeping busy helps Miguel Alves forget. His family escaped from Grenfell. Now, ironically, he and his wife are at a fundraiser for victims of recent fires in Portugal, his home country. They put on a brave face, but are tormented by what happened in the home they owned and had lived in for more than 20 years.
The worst thing is seeing the people waving and begging for help or doing those. This was the most shock thing I had. When I close my eyes, every time I close my eyes, I can still see the people waving and begging for help. This was the worst thing.
We met them again a few days later in their hotel.
It seems unreal. Even now, a month after, it seems unreal. I think in my mind, I still have that hope that
It's just a
I'm
dream.
going to my flat, wake up of that nightmare and say, well, no, this was just a nightmare, and we will go back to that place where we build ourselves with, with love.
We raise our kids.
We raise our kids there.
Famously, their daughter Ines sat her chemistry GCSE the day after the fire.
She's a very strong-willed girl.
She was very determined to
Yes,
go.
yeah.
I said, you can't go like that, when she said, I'm going to do the exam. And you can't go because you have no uniform. And she said, I don't care, I'm going. I've been studying very hard. I'm not going to miss my exam.
For this past month, the Alveses have reflected on their good fortune.
The important is we are alive.
Yeah.
We can
Continue our lives, even
lives.
with or without the belongings.
And I know that there are people much worse than us. They lost their belongings and they lost
Plus
their
the
families.
lives and families.
Members of family, so we are very lucky. I think we are the luckiest ones in the building.
That's because although their children were already upstairs in the flat, the Alves parents arrived home as the fire was starting. And as luck would have it, they got into the lift with two men going to the floor where the fire had broken out.
They exit at the 4th floor, we saw smoke. So our instinct was just get out of the lift, straight to the staircase, and he said to me, you go down into the garage and get the phone I left in the car. Well, I'll go upstairs and bring the children down. And they woke up all the neighbors and our children. And then when I came out of the building, I opened the door for the firefighters. They were arriving at that moment. I opened the door for them. I lead them into the staircase. And then I asked one of them, is that safe to stay in the building? And he said, no, you stay here. I said, yeah, but my children and my husband are upstairs, because at that moment my husband was already upstairs in the flat. And he said, yes, but my husband and my children are upstairs in the flat. And he said, which floor? I said, 13. No, tell them to stay inside, close doors and windows, and let them stay inside.
Of course, we now know that was the advice given to many of the families in Grenfell on the night and was part of the tower's fire safety drill. Fortunately for everyone on the 13th floor, Miguel didn't heed it.
I was calm when I went out to get the kids. I mean, I was very calm. I thought it was self-contained fire. I mean, I thought it was just even too much to wake them up, but I did anyway. I think I did the right thing, and I break the rules, but the rules, they have to be broken sometimes.
For now, home is a hotel. The family turned down an offer of a flat, holding out for more permanent accommodation. A month has passed, but for them, it's as if time stands still.
I know it was a distance between us, but there was like looking at us and help, 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 and begging and waving with the clothes and with the torches and with the mops outside the window and say, I'm here, and we couldn't do anything. Miguel, my husband, went to a police officer, the policeman, and he said, there's a lot of people inside the floods. And he said, calm down, because the firefighters are inside, they deal with the situation, they know what to do, and we trust, because they are professionals, we trust them. And at the end, how many casualties?
The family treasure the few videos and photos they still have of their flat, their daughter playing piano with a young friend. But nothing can bring back their home or the neighbours they've lost.
Every day I look for that tower and
Katie Razzle talking to the Alvarezes there.